Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this long weekend for you guys over there in the US, this Memorial Day weekend version of Steelers Q&A. This is your show for those in the live chat. This is the show where you can ask Bad, Bryan Anthony Davis, and myself, Matty Peverell from Down Under, any questions you like regarding the Steelers. But Bad, it's been a while since you and I did a show. Good to see you.
Oh, wow. This is a pleasure. I always love getting on with either you or Marky D. And, the great thing about the Sunday night Q&A, and you'll see this internally, I made a schedule. And we put the schedule out to have it go towards, because this show won't be going on during this regular season. So you notice I mixed it up. So we're with people that aren't usually with each other. So this is a great pleasure to be with you, Matty. I respect everything you do here at BTSC. I love working with you. So this is a treat for me, and I don't have to get up for work tomorrow morning, and I just my BTSC work, and that's it.
Well, I had the same thing because I work for an American company and I was out a few days, and my boss said, "Hey, it's Memorial Day weekend. Why don't you take your Monday off?" So I'm enjoying a Monday off here as well right now. So I'm in the same sort of mindset. And Bad, I just, an hour before the show, I was listening to you and KT, in the past, and now I'm in the future, and you're still in the past, and I'm with you live. So it's pretty crazy, but it's good to be with you.
That's another show. I mean, I don't think you've ever had a chance to really work with KT, have you?
Not really. I think one of the first times we've only really spoken during some of the draft Zooms that we had. But yeah, he's someone that and we did a review of one of the draft picks. I think we did Calvin. No, yeah, we might have done Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin or Connor Haywood or something like that. But yeah, he's someone that I'm keen to work with in the future. But he's a busy man, and so
I would definitely make that happen, because you know what? There's so many different personalities on BTSC with so many different backgrounds, and I love his background because he's a coach, so he sees it from a different angle. And we talked about it on the very show that you listened to. We talked about different angles and different, and looking at it from different directions, because we don't have the same backgrounds, but we respect each other, and it's great to hear. He wants to know what I'm thinking. I want to know what he's thinking. So that every week, that 40 minutes with KT Smith, Kevin Thatcher Smith, by the way, great middle name, and that's so much fun for me. Just like it is, I love getting down with the Aussies, and I'm pronouncing that right finally after almost 2 years.
That's it. Well, while we wait for a couple of questions to come in the live chat, I thought you guys talked about a really interesting situation, I guess, which is kind of the big news of the week outside of OTAs, and that was the hiring of Omar Khan. And I think, certainly your perspective shined through on that show about the Steelers know what they were doing. I thought this was quite interesting as well from the perspective of he was someone that I was really keen on, but didn't want to see Brandon Hunt, be lost to the Steelers organization. But the funny thing is, like, I every now and again I pick up A Different Way to Win, the book about Dan Rooney, and I was in a chapter last night that talked about the hiring of Bill Nunn and all the background to Bill Nunn. I agree with you what you and KT Smith were saying around Omar Khan. It's not that he's not a football guy, but if people think that the Steelers have won Super Bowls off the back of having solely a GM that knows how to scout people, that's not the way it's been done. When you look at the impact that, Bill Nunn had, and it was just funny to read that chapter in this week in the context of everything and how the Steelers, the mentality amongst picking people is not just they went to this good college. I mean, the Steelers had a number of guys come from the HBCU colleges and do really well. And that came from that Bill Nunn background and how we've developed, and it's, the cultural fits and what have you. So, I mean, as I said, I'm really happy with that hire, and I think Steelers fans in time, even if they're not on the train now, as Mark likes to say, they'll be on the train later on.
I love everything Mark has to say, by the way. We need to grab him. Hey, Mark, if you're out there listening, just jump on it. You don't have to be scheduled to jump in. I love working with that guy too. But the thing about Omar Khan for me, Matty, it's this. I think the Steelers looked at this situation we've got so many assets here, and we know that when we pick somebody over the other, then we are going to lose somebody. And who is the one that we don't think is replaceable at this time? And I really think that they love what they have with the numbers guy, And there's so many more football guys out there than numbers guys. So with the whole assistant GM situation, the new directors of scouting and personnel. So we've got Sheldon White in there. You have Kevin Colbert's son in there, Dan. And what does that tell you? That means if Dan's there, that Colbert's still going to have a vested interest in this. I'm talking about Kevin, which means he never said he was really going to go away. So if Dan's involved, he's not going to another franchise in Kevin, and that they're going to go ahead and he's going to be buzzing in some ears too. Like he's going to be a Yoda. You could call him up and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm taking a look. Do you want to take a trip with me? I'm going to Eastern Kentucky to check out this corner, or I'm going to Bowling Green. There's this undersized lineman that we think is really tough that we could grab as an undrafted free agent next year. Why don't we go check him out? That could be something too. But I think it's not that Brandon Hunt wasn't the guy for this team. It was the fact that there are more Brandon Hunts out there than there are Omar Khans. And I think that's the situation here.
Well, and Omar Khan is someone that's been a focus of different teams or been an attractive person to interview for them for a long time. I mean, Brandon Hunt's come into the conversation the last couple of years. It's not to say, but it's, as you say, it's different perspectives. And I mean, the numbers are just important as anything. I mean, it's a thinner number than what people realize to spread across, sometimes it's 90 players and other times it's, what is it, the 66 or whatever it is with the practice squad. So, you've got to be crafty in what you do. You've got to be crafty in the way you have deals and managing who's coming off contract and when and extensions and all the rest of it. So, it's an easy job to just sit there and say, oh, it's easy for someone to work the numbers, but it's a lot harder practically. And so that's the thing there with Omar Khan. But
you know what? Let me just jump in real quick. Last thing about Omar Khan. I make this joke all the time, but it's not really a joke. I'd love Omar Khan to come and help my wife balance the budget in the Davis house. I mean, seriously, this guy, I say it every year at free agency when people don't think that the Steelers have any money under the cap. And I'm talking about 2020 especially. And what I'm saying is this man knows how to find coins in couch cushions. He's really good at it. He knows where to find it. He knows how to juggle. He's just perfect. I mean, he will say, hey, yeah, you can afford that steak, but hey, on Tuesday, let's just dial down the dessert. And that's really who this guy is. So he's really good for the Steelers there. So I'm really excited about it.
Oh, me too. And I think the Weidl addition as well is going to be something that Steelers fans prove to be very happy about over the next few years as well. And you talked about that on the Here We Go Steelers show. But it is Steelers Q&A, so let's crack into some questions. Sean Manahan, definitely a BTSC regular. Do you think Pickens will become our number one wide receiver? I guess, Bab, that's kind of a two-part question. Do you think he'll become a number one wide receiver this year, or do you think it's something he can do over the life of his rookie contract?
I'm not worried about the rookie contract as far as that goes. Excuse me. I'm not worried about the rookie year for George Pickens. This is still Deontay Johnson's year. George Pickens is there to be moved in. I mean, you don't want him to be the number one receiver right away. You want to ease him in and let him just definitively take over when he's ready to take over. But you still have some guys capable of being number ones. Spare me hey, we've got 4 number 2s. Spare me that. No, you've got a number 1 Deontay Johnson. And there's a lot of talking about Deontay Johnson right now. And that's something you'll hear tomorrow on my Bad Language podcast. But just be careful with the whole Deontay Johnson thing. He hasn't made demands yet. We're assuming he's going to make demands. Christian Kirk got a lot of money. All I'm going to say about that is if that guy gets a lot of money, I sit back and say, maybe I'm worth that too. And we've seen some flashes of brilliance. And we talked about this the other day on the preview. And Dave Schofield said something very interesting. And it was about number 1 wide receivers. And they're like, if Mitch Trubisky starts out at quarterback, your number 1 option at wide receiver is going to be Deontay Johnson, probably. If it's Kenny Pickett, it's probably going to be George Pickens. because that's kind of how they work out with each other. George Pickens, I think, is going to be phenomenal for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He doesn't have to be phenomenal in 2022. He has to just have an upside going into 2023. What you get from George Pickens, what you get from Calvin Austin III is gravy. The guys that are going to be serving the meals, though, are going to be Deontay Johnson, and it has to be Chase Claypool as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on a lot of that. I mean, I think if Pickens can have the rookie year that Claypool had, I think we'd all be pretty happy with that, right? And so and he might need to if Claypool doesn't stack up, but I don't really want to walk down that path on this show. That's a whole show in itself. But I think that for me, you're right. Deontay Johnson hasn't made any claims yet. I did see a list with the top 5 or the top 10 paid wide receivers in the league, and Kirk's above a guy like a Keenan Allen. I've always loved Keenan Allen. I think if the problem for me with Deontay Johnson is even throughout these years, I'm not sure he's proved a $20 to $22 million plus contract, but that's just me. And this is the year he can do it. So, and he's still on his rookie contract. That's what a rookie contract is for. So I think there's a lot of assumptions being made by Deontay Johnson right now. The other thing as well is if you're Deontay Johnson, you need to sit back and think, well, hey, I've got Mitch Trubisky here, who's been a backup for a year, got run out of Chicago. I've got Kenny Pickett, who's a rookie out of Pittsburgh, picked number 20th in the draft, as much as all of us Steelers fans love, already are probably falling in love with him. Who's to say that there's no struggles there? Like, does Deontay Johnson might say, I want to sit behind, look at a Juju. Juju went over to, Kansas City, and I know the Steelers didn't necessarily want to pay Juju what teams like the Chiefs were prepared to pay him. But Deontay Johnson might want to go with a proven quarterback on a win-now team. I mean, we all think the Steelers are win-now, and I truly believe that. But he might not think so after a while. So I just bring that up because there's a lot of assumptions being made about Deontay Johnson right now and what he thinks and what he wants. Let's just see what happens. Let's just take the patient route.
Unfortunately, we are now in a situation with the way the NFL is now that there is not going to be a lot of those guys sticking around with the same team. I mean, I never thought you'd see Tyreek Hill on another team. I never thought, and that escalated quickly, but
that was smart though. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs got a ransom for that, a king's ransom.
And they really did. Now you look at what Deontay Johnson can do this year, and he has an opportunity to go off and earn that money. I think in the long run, I would be shocked at this moment to see him be in Pittsburgh in 2023. But that's a business decision. And that's a business decision that Deontay needs to make for the Johnson family. And the Steelers need to make that for the Rooney family and the Tomlin family and the families of the 53, because that king's ransom is pretty hard to pay. But that doesn't make him a pariah because he wants to make that money. So you've got to understand, with Juju Smith-Schuster, if they were to play Kansas City this year, there'd be hugs like crazy. 100%. I'm not going to have a problem rooting for Juju Smith-Schuster. He couldn't have gotten that money here. Just like when I saw Javon Hargrave go to the Pro Bowl with Philadelphia, I thought that was awesome. I thought that was great. We saw a potential superstar wide receiver leave, and the Steelers win the Super Bowl that very same year that he left in Plexico Burress. Sometimes that you set the team up to be able to lose a guy like that. The Steelers this year, by picking at 2 and 4 wide receivers and the guys that they did, they set themselves up to go ahead and lose this guy. Just like, I know it was a little early and premature, but go back to 2010 when they picked 2 wide receivers in that draft. In the 3rd round, it was Emmanuel Sanders. In the 6th round, it's Antonio Brown. They picked those guys because, one, they had a lot of picks. I think they had 10 picks that year. Yeah. But also, they might have saw the writing on the wall after his rookie season on what Mike Wallace could do. And with the fact that Hines Ward's getting old, and you have Antoine Randall L as your coming back as your 3rd wide receiver, that we need to get some new life in here. And if one of these guys do leave, then we've got our backup plan in place. And so that's it. This is looking at the future, but not having to put them in now and make that it's not a big deal what they do right now in 2022. But what the big deal is if they add more. If you get greatness from the two receivers and you get really good with a bright future from the other two, then you're set up to have Deontay Johnson walk.
Yeah, and I think my two things before we bring up the next question there are, one, I still say what I said, stick by what I said to Mark this time last year, or it might have even been January last year. I think Juju finishes his career in Pittsburgh. I think he's the sort of guy you see come back at the end and be that veteran third or fourth wide receiver. I just see it in the future. That's what my crystal ball's showing up right now. But I think the other thing with Deontay Johnson is, he may prove to be, even if he doesn't have the best, a year that a lot of people think is worth, $25 million a year money. What is Claypool doing? And if Claypool has a down year, they might have to pay Deontay Johnson, because Pickens and Austin might not be ready yet to take, 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 or 1 and 3, depending on however this, wide receiver room shakes out. So there are a lot of unknowns and there are a lot of conclusions being jumped to. But Sean Manahan brings up a different key player on the offense in Najee Harris and how many carries per game he's going to get. I'm going to go over and under on this one, Brian. Do you think that Najee over and under averages 22 carries per game?
I would have to say over on that. I really, and it scares me. I think they're going to run the wheels off of him, and that's just something that, and we as Steeler Nation, we've seen this so much throughout history, and we've seen it with Mike Tomlin. He loves the bell cow, and that's the way he does some things. But that has always scared the bejeebers. I don't have any bejeebers anymore. I don't know if in Australia if you have bejeebers, but I don't have them because they're scared out of me. Because right now, this is the guy that is going to carry your team as you have the transition, because you don't have a Ben Roethlisberger to carry the team. And Ben Roethlisberger was unable to carry the team to the lengths that he wanted to last year and what they needed to. But you risk the injury. The other thing that scares me is the fact that the man went 17 games, did not get hurt, but got banged up, really banged up hard in week 17. He got banged up. And we feel like the offensive line is going to improve. And if the offensive line improves, that he can take the onus off of the quarterbacks, whether it's a young Kenny Pickett or whether it's a Mitch Trubisky trying to find his way back into Glory, not Gloria. I don't know who she is. I mean, God bless you, Gloria, wherever you are. But if he's trying to get back to be a top tier quarterback, and if that happens, you really need Najee. Najee's the guy that has to carry this team, but it can't be at the expense of Najee, because Najee goes, everything gets weaker. He's the foundation.
Yeah, and for me as well, he had 307 rush attempts in, 2021. There's 307 rush attempts behind this O-line. That might be a much easier 307 rush attempts than the 307 that he had last year. So he's got a year of football behind his belt. If they're smart, I think and there's also a thing where they can run the wheels off him, but do it in a way where his snaps are still managed. I think they're going to use him more in the short passing game as well. So things will be managed, but in terms of the overall 381 touches I think he had in the regular season last year, he's going to be having probably about the same amount again, if not breaking the 400 mark. So, but he proved he could do it in his rookie year as well. And that's why you get an older back, you get a bigger back like that. You get a back that's played SEC football for a team like an Alabama. Steel Nation 412, quick fire. I mean, we like talking about the Steelers here, but who will win more, us or Cleveland?
I think they're in shambles right now. I think, Deshaun Watson might be taking everybody on trips and cruises, but he's not going to be playing for much in the first half of the season. And I would not be surprised if he gets, look, right now, if you said over under being 8 games, I would say that over, he gets more than that. I really think that he's in a situation where the NFL is going to go ahead and throw some major sanctions at him.
Mm.
Baker Mayfield, I'm still not convinced he's playing for the Cleveland Browns. And as a Steeler fan, I'd rather him play for the Cleveland Browns because I don't believe in him.
Yeah.
The only place I don't want to see him play is in Pittsburgh. But I don't mind him visiting once a year. That's fine. So no, I would say the Steelers so much more than Cleveland. I think the Steelers are going to have that team that surprises you there because they might have lost a franchise quarterback, but the foundation is there, and what they're bringing in is going to be very helpful. I look at one thing, which they didn't have the foundation at quarterback that much. They were in transition at quarterback going from 1991 to 1992. They were in transition at head coach. They went from the legend of Chuck Noll to an unknown guy that all he had was a great Yinzer accent and a cool mustache. And that was Bill Cowher. Everybody was saying that, man, Sports Illustrated right before the season started had the Steelers at 4-12. They went 11-5, had the number 1 seed, won the division, and the rest is history. What happened? Great career for Coach Cowher. So I don't think the transition. We know this is not a rebuild. So I really think that if the Steelers don't have the year that we expect of them, I still don't think it's 4th place. They are 3rd place at worst in this division.
Yeah, I think they're going to go right in there and contend for the division. I think they are going to surprise people, like you said. And even if they can just scrape through with the 7th seed, I think they're going to be a team in the playoffs if they can make it that far. That teams are not going to want to play against the Steelers, particularly if this defense and this secondary can get into the equation. The next question we've got is from Johnny Bravo Bad. And he says, what do the Steelers do at QB if Trubisky plays great and makes a deep playoff run? So we started talking about, the prospects for the Steelers. What do you do then with Trubisky?
Then you have options. You have, this is what sucks. This is because you're playing with humans. You're turning them into chess pieces and poker chips. You're turning them into pawns. And I hate to think about that. But what you do is you just decide if you're still excited about Kenny Pickett, then you dangle him and you see what you can get out of Mitch Trubisky. Even if he has a deep run, because then his value is sky high. Or you just say that, hey, we think what Mitch Trubisky did in year number 1 could mean a Lombardi trophy in year number 2. Then you just say, well, we're going to delay the Kenny Pickett era 1 year. And that's okay too. But that's a good problem to have because you have Kenny Pickett there. If your problem is you have 2 very good quarterbacks that in different ways showed up and you have a wealth, that's a lot better than having 2 that suck. And next thing you know, you're like, we got to try to trade up and pick a quarterback because we whiffed on Pickett and whiffed on Trubisky. Yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing. So if you have 2 good guys, that's rich guy problems. That's like Matty. I'm sure back in the day, you've had 2 hot dates at the same time, and you were trying to decide which one to continue seeing and which one to call when you have a spat.
Yeah, and I think there you take the long term. Who's going to be the long term better prospect? And that's the challenge I think that you've got with that. I mean, that scenario worries me a little bit. I've got to say, I think even if there's a deep playoff run, it's still got to be any man's job this time next year. I think, I think there'll be a lot of fans that are pretty cranky if Kenny Pickett's not pushing Mitch Trubisky out the door even by this time next year, or at least going through training camp next year. But that's okay, because if that's not going to work out, move him on, and then we can draft Archie Manning, who's going to lead the Texas Longhorns back to the promised land. But we're jumping a lot of guns there. But interesting question here from Shrek Johnny's friend. Maybe that's Johnny Bravo's friend. I don't know.
But I would think Johnny Bravo's buddy. Yeah. I think it's Johnny Bravo. I think Johnny Bravo has 2 accounts.
He's got 2 accounts. One on the mobile or one on the computer. That Shrek Johnny's friend says, what opponent are you worried about playing this season? Interesting question there.
Well, I really got to say, I'm not one of those guys that say that the Cincinnati Bengals are an aberration. But the one team I'm not worried about playing, and every year I'm saying I'm worried about playing the Baltimore Ravens. I'm less worried about playing the Baltimore Ravens because of one man, and it's Brian Flores. And the reason I'm saying that, when you saw what Miami did to this team last year, befuddled Lamar Jackson, completely befuddled him. And the Steelers typically do well against Lamar Jackson. But Lamar was doing nothing against the Brian Flores defense. And so I'm just going to say that. So that's a team I'm going to take off the list. I think Cincinnati, we got to look inside the division here. And I think it's Cincinnati. If we look outside of the division, probably Buffalo. And I'll say on the regular season schedule, don't sleep on the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they're pretty tough. But that's a division that they're going to beat each other up. In the AFC East, who the Steelers play the most of, nobody scares me but Buffalo. But Buffalo could be an L that you take because it's on the road. I don't think you go in there after beating them last year and you go in and have an easy time of it. I just think what you do is you're going to have some teams you're going to struggle with. You're going to have some good teams that you're going to do well against. But in the division, I still feel like I have to worry about the Cincinnati Bengals because they addressed their needs. They addressed the offensive line. They addressed the defensive backfield, and that was their weakness going into the Super Bowl. They're going to be tough. Do I expect them to win the Super Bowl this year? No. But I expect them to be the favorite for the division and be pretty tough.
Yeah, for me, it's the Las Vegas Raiders. Las Vegas Raiders are an absolutely key game. It's week 16. It's another team that's, if they're playing half as well as they should be in the mix for, or at least in the playoff hunt. If you can't go out and beat them after what happened last year at Heinz Field, that's a real problem for me going into the playoffs, even if we're sitting pretty at the top of the division. So that's the game I'm kind of looking forward to down the schedule, because I think that's going to tell you a lot really quickly as well. And they've retooled in a lot of different ways. They've gotten much better on defense, particularly if there's a Kenny Pickett in that sort of a week. That's the sort of game that you'll be able to see whether Kenny Pickett's the guy or not. So I'm pretty interested in that Las Vegas Raiders game. Who do you expect, actually? I'm going to ask a question there to be, people brought up the AFC West, schedule, and obviously we're taking on some of those teams. Who do you expect to top that division? Because that division right now, everyone's calling that the loaded division, but they might knock each other around and put each other out of playoff contention. So,
I'm still not ready to say that the Chiefs are done. You just really can't. They did not have a bad off season. Sure, they lost Tyreek Hill, but look what they added, and they kind of reloaded. They also have some draft picks coming their way. I'm not a Chiefs guy, but I believe in the Chiefs more than I believe in everybody else. I think the Chargers are going to be good, but there's so many years that I thought the Chargers were going to be good. The one year that they went to the Super Bowl, they weren't supposed to be that good. But when they're favorites, they don't really come through. They haven't had the history of coming through. Denver scares the hell out of me because Denver knows how to win. The Raiders, like you just said, they've done some pretty good things, but the Chiefs are still the cream of that division, and it's going to be hard to tell me that they're not.
Is there a game that I'm going to flip that question in the absence of another from the live chat. Is there a game you're really not looking forward to?
Wow. Wasn't ready for that question. Maybe the Buffalo game. Maybe Buffalo's the game I'm not looking forward to, but really not too many. Well, yes, for different reasons. And you've already agreed to work on Christmas Eve here in America.
That's fine.
Because I thought it would have been a great podcast for when we did the schedule Dave Schofield, Jeff Hartman, and myself to have our wives on the show and let them know that the Steelers have a primetime game on Christmas Eve. Because we were like, oh, damn. I mean, I would have loved to have had their reactions. But no, there's really nobody that I think they're going to be fine. I mean, are they going 17-0? No. I mean, I think it's realistic to say that 10-7 or 11-6 is a good year in this day and age of the NFL. And I have no problem with that. So you're going to lose some games. Buffalo is probably the team that scares me the most. And somebody said, hey, don't sleep on Bill Belichick. Hey, I have no problem saying that that's a team that's always going to be a contender, no matter who the quarterback is. Do I believe in Mac Jones? No. But do I believe in Bill Belichick? Yeah. Snowman mentions playing the Ratbird scares him. It usually does for me. I get so excited for Baltimore week. And I like the way the Steelers have been playing them lately.
Yeah.
So I guess Cincinnati kind of scares me this year, but anybody else, I guess Buffalo, but nobody in the NFC. I mean, even Tom Brady coming in, that'll be a good game because and the reason I'm shaping my answer the way I am is because the Steelers do well against good teams.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, and Brian Brown brings it up correct. Not looking forward to a Steelers game. That doesn't compute. It's just one that you don't particularly like on the schedule. It might be there's a short turnaround or what have you. Like, the Colts game comes at an interesting time for the Steelers. That could be a really important one in the AFC shakeout that you don't want to lose away in Lucas Oil Field and what have you. So, it's those sorts of games that, when it affects your playoff contention. Like, I don't like the Panthers game because that's the sort of game that's that Tomlin lose against a, average team game that, could affect them down the stretch as well. But, these are all things that'll play themselves out. And, maybe Brian and I are wrong. Maybe they run the table. Maybe they go 17-0. Maybe they better the, 11-0 from a few years ago. But I think it's at the end of the day, what we think now is there's a lot to happen. OTAs to continue, and you've got minicamp, and not minicamp, you've got training camp, and then you've got the preseason. Like, there's a lot of water to go under the all the bridges of Pittsburgh.
There definitely is, and the thing you've got to worry about is, and Dave yells at me every time I say this, but you've got to worry about an injury, and that is going to not just affect the Steelers, it's going to affect one of those teams that we mentioned. I forgot about the Colts game. That's probably the scariest game on the schedule now that I think about it. And I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, the Colts are I think going to be superb this year. I really think they are. I actually predicted when we did the way too early predictions that the Colts beat the Steelers in the offseason and the Steelers beat them in the playoffs. And the Colts are the number 1 seed. I'm going back to 2005 and looking forward to start all over there. But I just you see a team like that you expect to be amazing, and then that injury bug hits you, and then they're a team that you're not talking about. Everybody was talking about Seattle last year. I thought Seattle could have been really good last year. Could have been in the Super Bowl, and that injury took them out of it. And injuries take guys out of it.
100%. But I think with that wraps up this Memorial Day weekend's edition of the Steelers Q&A. Dad, it's been a pleasure to be with you. It's been a pleasure to be with all our BTSC listeners live on YouTube and Facebook, and those that will be listening to us on the audio side. BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers, your non-stop shop, and you can find us anywhere where you get good podcasts.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.